Hello, everybody. My name is Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP, and on the first Partner Talks for 2025, I had a returning guest, Jason Gumpert. Jason, introduce yourself, and for those who don't know you, tell them who you are and what you do.
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having me back. Happy New Year. Hi, everyone. Jason Gumpert. I am the editor at MSDynamicsWorld, so I'm covering business applications from the product and user and channel perspective.
Okay, and we had a big year last year, 2025. What are some of the key takeaways you'd like to talk about? And we can go through them one at a time. That you saw happen and sort of build up in 2025 in this Microsoft business application space.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to talk about, and I mean, the first thing that jumps into my head when you suggested this was probably one of the last things I covered in 2024, which was sort of the, I guess, acceleration of the focus on AI agents, autonomous agents, as part of Microsoft's vision for business applications. And it, I would say, kind of came to a head in December. And it generated a lot of community discussion online, really kind of based around some statements that Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella made.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about those statements, because they were quite interesting.
Yeah, it was, there was discussion about this. I don't know that we have sort of the final word on it, but my take. So he talked, I wrote about this and others did too. He spoke to, on a podcast with the hosts are venture capitalists, really focused on AI. And the conversation all up was Microsoft's AI, outlook as Satya Nadella sees it. There was a small portion, where he really talked about the vision of how this impacts business applications. And he went right into that. He dove straight into that, and he said really directly that he sees the long-term vision for Dynamics as being, all about autonomous agents, and that Dynamics applications have sort of the older thinking of, forms over data and business logic, and that AI agents will eventually be able to take all of that responsibility out of the sort of middle layer and the front end and do away with those. And then once the AI understands the database layers across all the various business applications and silos out there, it can take away those database layers too, and all you'll have is a bunch of AI agents and a unified data model underneath. Dynamics kind of goes away, everything goes away, and it's all agents all the way down. So it's a, and he used the word collapse, right? He said Dynamics will collapse into AI agents, which my take on that was not that Microsoft has any specific plan to do that, to get rid of Dynamics apps, but it was, kind of inflammatory language. I don't know how specific it was, but to me, my take was this was the CEO talking without sort of the input of product marketing teams or anything like that, certainly not partners. So now everyone else can sort of interpret it and discuss it. And it's super interesting from my perspective. I didn't take it as like a warning sign or anything like that, just a super interesting sort of high energy Satya Nadella sort of perspective on the world.
Well, the first thing I think about is, well, I'm glad Satya still thinks about Dynamics, right? Because we're kind of a small part of his business, which is good. And then if we start looking at business applications, yes, I think they'll morph with AI. I think they're going to change a lot over the next few years, but we have an incredible amount of work to do within our customers. And I know Microsoft sells licenses and builds us a framework for solutions, but the partners, we have to deliver on it. So if we look at what's going on out there today, we're still in the very early stages. And if we were crossing the chasm sort of model from Jeffrey Moore, that, we're still at the front end, I think, of the early adopter stage from a customer perspective. I think the partners have absorbed it. I think the software companies are moving forward quickly, but the customers themselves are going to be in that early adopter stage for a while, at least until they get, their systems migrated to the cloud and their data models figured out.
I absolutely agree. I think it's still very early stages from the customer perspective. And then from the partner, like when I was thinking about this conversation, I wrote down partner adaptation and tension. That's, I think, maybe to your point, partners now have to sort of balance this world between, being excited about the future, but then talking to their customers and their prospects in a language that doesn't scare them away, doesn't cause concern, and that resonates with them, right? If they're talking all AI agents, only, like you said, a small segment of businesses out there are ready to go that way.
And they've got to keep their businesses running the way they are and change things. So, I saw one consultant speak about, I'm changing the wheels on a car that's moving, right? I can only do so much so quickly. And I think we're going to get there. And I think it's all positive news. It's just, what we can do with it in 2020, what we could do with it in 2024, and what we're going to be able to do with it in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would just note, one thing I noticed toward the end of 2024 is, there are people sort of expressing a bit of, what's the right word? So they're becoming impatient with rhetoric versus what they're seeing in the real world. So those voices might grow a little louder in 2025 if they're not seeing sort of Microsoft and other vendors really make sense of this vision that they have and harmonizing it with what they're actually putting out there for customers.
And I think everybody's on a learning curve, both the partners and the customers. We just did a user group meetup in Toronto, and we had quite a few CE customers in a room talking about AI, and they're very interested, but when we talk to them, they haven't really started anything yet. They're still learning about it. They're understanding what they can do. They're understanding the security models, those types of things. So I think 2025 is going to be a big year for that growth.
Yeah, and I think, these are a lot of organizations. You'll slowly get a few more forward-thinking people really getting their arms around it, perhaps, and then, like any new technology, they have to then sell the rest of the organization on these changes, which can be, think about a lot of the sort of ideas are, natural language, like using natural language to do what you typically are used to doing in sort of very formatted, structured ways. Things like that are not easy transitions. So that'll be a lot of a lot of that give and take, push and pull from traditional to new.
So we know AI was a big story in the Microsoft world in 2024. What else did you see out there?
Yeah, I mean, one that jumped out at me was the end dates that have been set for Dynamics GP. I think within the Microsoft business application space, that was a big one. It's not going to signify any real changes, I don't think any tidal wave changes in 2025, but more and more of the GP customers out there in the world will become sort of aware of what the future holds and make some decisions about where they're going to go. That'll continue into 2026, 2027. I mean, that'll continue over the next 3 years, but I think it will push a lot of them forward into thinking about what's next. So, and I think partners too. I think one prediction, if I can make one, is that consolidation will accelerate in the sort of GP services space. Fewer and fewer partners will offer GP services. I think you might see fewer partners offering GP to Business Central, sort of specific GP to Business Central migration, since I think that's a very complicated move, both in terms of sort of the emotion of it and also the technical challenge of it. So, I think that'll become a very interesting sort of space that who's supporting GP and who's not supporting GP.
Well, I'm glad Microsoft came out with the statement and said, okay, there's an end of life to GP, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about it in the channel for the last few years. And, I think it's going to resonate now to the customer, because I'm not sure if the same conversation was happening with the customers. I think they were just running their businesses, and now, this came out, okay, I've got an end of life on this product. I've got to do something. So I think there's a group of GP partners out there, and I'm seeing a lot of consolidation in this world where, some of the bigger partners have sold off their GP business to GP specific partners. And I think those are the ones that are going to carry on with the migration, whether it's to Business Central, or we're actually seeing some trying to move up to F&O and to finance. So we will see that considerably accelerate, I think, over the next 3 to 4 years. We're just, I think there's going to be a struggle for partners to find the resources to do it because the GP consulting base is sort of aging out a little bit, right? So we're going to need lots of help there.
Or they've already been retrained on another ERP.
Yes.
Right? They've already moved themselves to Business Central and they're not interested. I mean, who wants to go back? And if you've already moved on in your career as a consultant, who wants to go back, right?
Okay. So interesting stuff in the AI space and the GP space. What else did we see last year, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the AI space for a bit, I think on the Power Platform side, there's some really, really interesting possibilities there. So whereas I have some, I guess, skepticism about how fast Dynamics 365 apps will adopt different kinds of AI agent vision that Microsoft has, I think the story with Power Platform is really interesting, especially if you consider Copilot Studio part of Power Platform. Still, I think that's technically correct. Although, we'll see, but how that sort of gets managed. But I think things like Microsoft showed off some really interesting stuff where it comes to planning to build out applications, automating sort of the way that apps work, the way that Power Automate behaves, and just the sort of the overall Copilot Studio vision, which is really an agent building vision, I think, for the future. So those could move much more quickly because they are much more flexible. And so you can build something and apply it at a more specific business case. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes up there. People were really engaged, I would say, at the conferences I went to and saw sort of live reaction to some of the demos. People had a lot of questions and they were really, really interested, I would think, in what Microsoft is trying to move forward there. And a lot of it will, I think, reach production in 2025.
Yeah, I agree. I sat on a few sessions when we looked at Copilot Studio, and, I think that's the way to go. Buying a separate Copilot for all these different functions and all these different applications from a cost perspective and from an integration perspective, and you're limited to what they can do. When I watch a developer working with the tools that you're talking about, it's a different world, right? There's, they can build exactly what they need. And if we look at the licensing costs, it seems to be a lot more in line with what the customers are looking for.
Yeah. I could throw one other prediction out there, just based on some what I've been seeing in the end of 2024. I think we're going to see more of the sort of old-fashioned Dynamics 365 versus Salesforce dust-up that we've seen in the past. I feel like, and you can tell me how you see this, but it was really heated for a few years, and then it really sort of simmered down to where Microsoft maybe wasn't trying to go head-to-head with Salesforce the way it was at one point in its past. Trying to differentiate itself, have its own sort of value proposition. But AI has really brought that back to the fore. You see Mark Benioff really using inflammatory language again about why Microsoft is so inferior with its AI offerings for CRM. And so I think that's just the beginning of a lot more of that kind of back and forth. I've seen it, on LinkedIn through sort of product level people as well. So I'm interested to see sort of what comes from that. I think it's great actually to have more people talking about the specifics of what AI is really delivering or not delivering. I think that's healthy at this point because it can't be all vision statements and PowerPoint decks. People have to try to show evidence, and that can only help clarify the landscape.
I really appreciate you bringing that up because I think, from a partner perspective, we always felt we competed with Salesforce. We never thought they were our close ally. And I think Microsoft was getting close to them. In fact, when the first Copilots came out for CRM, a lot of them the demos were done in Salesforce. In fact, I sat through one with a user group community and they were using Salesforce as an example. And I always thought, wow, is Salesforce really going to let Microsoft move into, this component of their CRM product? And we can see now that no, it's not part of their strategy. And I think they call their products Einstein. is really head-to-head competitive with copilots.
Yeah, so maybe that'll give more context, more ways for the companies to really try to make their case, and I think that's good for everybody.
Okay, all right, Jason. What else do you think is going to happen in 2025 for partners? Any predictions?
Well, I think you have. I'll just mention. I know you have a very interesting LinkedIn poll out just recently, and it's showing kind of what I was thinking, which was that a lot of the basics are still going to apply for Microsoft partners in 2025. Customers still have the most basic business, not basic, but the typical business needs that have always driven them. So bringing more automation to their businesses, making better sense of their data, focusing on sort of finding value in the business and eliminating friction, right? So a lot of that happens in the kind of the nuts and bolts of what Business Central or sales or finance and supply chain management solution tends to bring. And that's where a lot of the partners' best work is done, right? Is in bringing those kinds of solutions to the fore. So I started off talking about sort of the tension that partners feel, but I think that's, one of the best things that I think the channel can do is continue to bring in good wins and good stories about, those kind of core successes with the products.
And, this is almost the same prediction I had for 2024, as I thought it was going to be the year of the data, because we need better data to make all this work. And when I look at, I'm not that involved with projects anymore, but when I do get involved and I see what's going on, there's a lot of data work that still needs to be done, a lot of tools that need to be built for, duplication management, merger of data, that type of thing. And there's going to be a lot of data projects, I think, over the next at least 2 to 3 years, trying to get ready for this world of AI.
Yeah, if I could just leave us with a couple of stats that I pulled looking back at the most recent Microsoft earnings. On the Dynamics side, Dynamics 365 solutions now represent 90% of total Dynamics revenue, which is a lot, actually more than I would have thought. That means that, to me, I interpret that as saying, the legacy products are only 10% of Microsoft's Dynamics revenue at this point. So AX, GP, old CRM on premises, right? Perpetual licensing. So it's really interesting. That really says something about where the products are at. And then the other one is just that, what was the other stat that I was going to mention? That MAUs for Copilot are growing. So, I think both sides. Oh, and then the one other one I guess I would mention is Fabric, right? When it comes to data, Fabric is up to 16,000 customers. I think that's still going to sort of grow slowly if it remains such an expensive product. But I think a lot of the technology there has a ton of possibility for Dynamics customers. So I'm interested to see if and how Microsoft kind of makes any more of a push to make that part of the overall BizApp story.
And I'm glad you brought up Fabric, because I was involved with a Fabric presentation at the Doug conference, Dynamics Con. And also we did some online work with MSDynamicsWorld, and we had huge crowds come out to hear about Fabric. So I think there's a lot of interest. I think it's a great positioning product. And again, going back to the data, that's work that needs to be done on data to get Fabric working. So I think we'll see Fabric grow considerably as well in 2025.
For sure.
Okay, Jason, I want to thank you for your time as always, and I'm sure we'll be back to you in the near future to hear more about what's going on with MSDynamicsWorld and predictions for what's going on with Microsoft.
Thanks, Rick. It should be a great 2025. Always fun chatting about the future with you.
Okay, thanks, and have a great day.